also, obviously, at this point, we've covered the fact that we're both wrestling fans and feminists. Surprise, surprise, you're on this podcast. Have you, in your journey with feminism, has wrestling been something where you found that it often aligns with those things, or is it sometimes more of a thing that you kind of have to, like a hindrance, like you kind of have to explain it to yourself why you're participating in this?
Oh man, yes. I think that's part of why I stopped watching wrestling, because I stopped watching wrestling when I was about 12. And certain things, especially coming off of the Attitude Era into the Ruthless Aggression Era, that whole period, like things like the Lita and Edge sex show, like, pop in my head, a lot of things like that. Or one of the last things I remember, speaking of like Jacqueline and Sable, there was like some kind of striptease match or something like that, to where I was like, okay, like this is so frustrating seeing like talented women kind of be reduced to this, like, because for example, we're not getting the Kenny Omega striptease, for example, but I digress.
Mm-hmm.
But things like that, I think, are kind of what took me out of it as a fan from that age. And, especially like learning about feminism, discovering those parts of myself, and kind of like reconciling those things within me, and kind of being like, well, if I'm watching this, does this really align with here? And not really being able to compartmentalize those things in certain ways. So I think that was probably a huge reason why I took a break from wrestling for so long, admittedly. And then, I came back into wrestling just before we saw things like the Four Horsewomen, happen, or even like with Paige Saraya, I was always obsessed with her. AJ Lee too, like
Mm-hmm.
wrestlers in that time period who just like really spoke to me. It's like a punk rock loving girl, seeing these two icons wrestling. And yeah, that was amazing. So I feel like there's been different parts on my journey where things resonate with me, and then I have to kind of either compartmentalize or step away for a little bit, And to be completely honest, too, full disclosure, Sabrina and I actually have had a conversation before when Vince kind of came back in the picture too for WWE, because I started watching WWE full time essentially as soon as I found out that he was out the door. I was like, and I'm back in, like tag
Mm-hmm.
me in. I'm back into watching WWE, because that was a huge, yeah, everything happening there that came out about him was just, yeah, I couldn't watch it, And when he stepped away, it put me back into the fold where I felt really comfortable watching it again. And then seeing everything Triple H did with creative too was really exciting. There's just been a couple of things where I've taken pause, since he's gotten back. So I did take a 2-month break from where I wasn't watching any WWE at all, trying to kind of figure out where does this fit into my life, And on a different note too, like me being like even like a Rick and Morty fan, for example, that was kind of another thing, having to step away from that, loving that too, but then conflicting feelings. And it's really interesting to think about. So I'm currently back on the WWE train, but we'll see.